Give him a nice warm welcome.
Hello everyone, I'm Lewis, an alcoholic. My sobriety date is December 15th, 2018. And for drinking for 42 years, it feels really great to be able to stand up here and have 2 years under my belt, because that's really hard to do. So anyways, a little bit about me. I'm from Arizona originally. Born here in 1957 in Phoenix. Lived all over Arizona, really. Different places from Flagstaff to Sierra Vista to Show Low, Snowflake, and in the valley. And, you know, my family, I guess when you look back at my family, my mother's side of the family, I didn't really know if they drank too much, but I kind of had a hint that they did, because they'd come down to Tucson to pick me up to go down to Mexico for a couple of days. And I always thought I was really advantaged because I got to go spend a couple days with my grandparents. What I found out some years later is they took me down there because they could bring extra booze across the border. And it didn't really hit me until much later. So I kind of started thinking that maybe they had some drinking problems too. But on the other side of my family, my father's side, they were serious alcoholics. And I think they still are. Some of them still are today. I remember one time when I got up early, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was helping my grandmother do some things around the house. And I saw her take a bottle of vodka and pour it in a glass full of ice. And I asked her what that was, and she said, "It's a vodka water." And little did I know that later on in my life, I would probably be doing the very same thing almost every day. Being here in Arizona and going to school down here, you know, of course the weather's really nice, and I thought that my career path would be I'd either be a baseball player, because I was into baseball, or a professional golfer. And things were kind of going down that path because that's what I liked to do, and I was totally against drinking it. I'd had a bad taste in my mouth about that from early on, so I didn't want to go down that path. But we moved to Alaska in 1971. No golf and no baseball. And of course I didn't take up drinking that early, but it wasn't too much longer than that I did. What I did become was a juggler. And when I think about that now, after being sober for a couple of years, you know, I juggled a lot of things: emotions, family, business, relationships, pretty much everything. Community service work, everything, and booze, of course, was probably the biggest common denominator for that. So my first drink, I had to think back on this because I thought maybe I had a little bit when I tasted one of my father's beers, but I don't think that really counted. So growing up in Juneau, Alaska, our family was pretty much welcomed everybody into our house. And at that point in time, I had already graduated from high school. And in our house was my best friend, who I call my big brother, my cousin, who is here today, the rest of our family, and a foreign exchange student from Australia. And he was a year behind me, and he always talked about drinking, and I would never give in. And I even went to my senior class party, and I was like the only one in the room that didn't drink. And people gave me a lot of crap for that. So it was maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, I went to a party at a friend's house, and we were playing pool. And my friend from Australia, Jeff, he said, "Why don't you have a beer?" And I said, "Well, all right, I'll try one." Well, it wasn't just a beer, it was a Foster's Lager. And I only had 2, right? But they're like this big. So it really kind of affected me in a pretty unique way, I think. At the time, I'd never felt anything like that, but I liked it. I thought, this is pretty cool. And so it was snowing that night, and we decided to get a ride from a friend back home. And we lived up at the top of the hill. If you're familiar with Juneau, it's on the side of a mountain. And we lived at the very top of the hill. And he couldn't get his car to go up there, so he stopped at the bottom of the hill, and we got out, and we walked up the stairs to our house, and it was 319 steps. And so we were pretty tired by the time we got to the top of it, but pretty loaded too. And I remember walking up the rest of the hill and laughing all the way, and standing up at the top and looking back and watching our footprints going back and forth across the road, and just laughing about it. And you know, when I think back about stuff like that, first of all, I haven't really wanted to think back about stuff like that. So being asked to speak up here today, this is the first time I've ever really thought about a lot of the older things that I had done and how they affected my life. So thank you for inviting me to do this. But that feeling was pretty incredible. And you know, I didn't jump right in and start drinking a lot right away. We kind of hung out with friends and drank a little bit and had fun. We called it partying, but we didn't really get in any trouble. We stayed pretty mellow. My parents would let us drink in the house, so that was kind of interesting. I have to remember one time that my mom and dad, my mom didn't drink very much, and she had never tried pot, right? So this one day she decided she was going to try pot. And my dad had to leave her at somebody else's house. And so he came walking in the house, and we're downstairs watching TV, a bunch of friends, mine and I, and everybody was drinking beer. And he looked at us and said, he got all mad. You know, he said, "What the hell are you guys doing?" And we're like, "Oh God, what's going to happen now?" And he stood back and says, "You know what I'm going to do?" And we said, "No, what?" He says, "Well, I'm going to have a beer." I should have known then that I was in trouble when you have that kind of support. So, so that was my experience with alcohol to begin with. And then I went to work for the family business, and we would party a little bit at night, but I also knew I could have had problems when at lunchtime, all my coworkers and I would go to the bar, and we'd have a hot dog and a beer for lunch, and then maybe 2 beers, and the rest of the day was pretty easy. But my dad's partner asked me to go and help them expand their business into Sitka, which is maybe an hour flight from Juneau. So I went over there by myself. I ran a business over there, about 18 to 20 hours a day service business, and really got into drinking a little bit more. Had friends over there, and that's pretty much all we did. And I also decided, at the time of the era, disco was really hot, right? So my friend and I decided to create our own mobile disco, and we had one of the first mobile discos in the whole United States, and it was in Sitka, Alaska. And we would travel and party between towns. Even Alaska Airlines would hire us to go do their dances at their Christmas party in Seattle. So we would do all that, but drinking became the norm. And again, I should have known that I had a problem when I was at the wrong place at the wrong time one day and got an assault charge and ended up spending some time in jail. And I said at that point that no matter what I do, I don't want to go back to jail. So it didn't stop me from drinking, but I really made a conscious effort at that point to really maintain and try to be on my best behavior. I saw a lot of drunks that would get in trouble in fights, and I was always the guy that stood back and tried to be nice. But that didn't help my drinking. So as you can see, I'm starting to juggle business life, personal life, and again, the common denominator is the drinking. So after my stint in jail, I decided I didn't want to stay in Sitka anymore. What was getting me in trouble, I thought, at the time, was just being by myself. So I moved back to Arizona and became a DJ in Phoenix for a while. Was also a bouncer at a resort and a bartender, which really didn't help the situation. And by the time, about 8 months later, I went back to Juneau. We were already drinking, every night and partying on the weekends. And so alcohol had pretty much it was a mainstay in what I was doing. When I got back to Juneau, I again went back to work for the family business, starting a new division, And I got the opportunity to do a lot of work in the community service. I really liked that. I had a lot of business friends, business owners, state of Alaska commissioners, governor of Alaska, lots of politicians. That was my biggest account, was the Juneau legislature. So I got involved with them. But I also, again, should have known that I was juggling a lot of things, and I should have seen the handwriting on the wall when it became the reputation in town as to don't call Lewis before 10 o'clock in the morning because he's a night person. And it really never hit me. And not until much later. So as you can see, I've been starting to juggle, friends, business, everything more and more. Everything was up in the air all the time. And at that time, a lot of my friends got into more hard drugs. I never smoked pot myself, but I did do cocaine, and we got into that in a pretty big way. I had at the time, a really nice income, and it was very easy to access. And again, one of my accounts was the politicians. And so hanging out with all those folks, I thought, maybe I should be a politician. And so I kind of explored that for a while. And I'm just being really honest here, but it got to a point where during the days, I had an office furniture and interior design business, and they had hired me to do the legislative hall. So we had done that, and then they had this little penthouse room up on top of the elevator shaft. And they had me come in and help them design this room on top of the elevators. And all that was in it was we had chairs all around it and a bunch of copiers, because the copiers had the glass on them. So you could use the bottom of the copier to do your lines. So we started really getting into that, and I got really scared. And that was probably the most scared I was ever in my whole life at that point. And so I said, I got to get out of here. And I didn't know how to stop. I didn't know about AA or NA or anything like that. So I just ran away. And I moved to Juneau, but I used the excuse, I moved to Anchorage, and I used the excuse that I wanted to start a new branch. Really had no business up there, but there was a lot of opportunity, and I thought it would be a place for me to hide from all my friends. And fortunately for me, I did not do drugs ever again. So that worked for me to stop my drug usage, but it did not stop my alcohol consumption. So again, you can see how I'm really juggling work, juggling family, friends, booze is always there. And the drinking life still stayed there because the socializing that we did in the sales area of my organization meant socializing after hours with people. In fact, one of my brothers worked with me, and it was always a running joke to us because we would sell during the day. 4:30 at night, or 4:30, the state of Alaska closed and the bars would open in the building we were working in. So we'd go to the bar, and then we'd go to a couple other bars, and we'd end up at a place called Chilkoot Charlie's at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then we'd get back up at 7 o'clock and start all over again. Every single day, it was like that. And it really wore on us. But I should have known then again that we had a problem, more so than just the drinking, because half the employees we hired at the bar the night before and had them come to work with us at 7 o'clock the next morning. And then we were always pissed off when they didn't show up. And we just didn't get it. So again, juggling all kinds of things. And I think the next thing that stands out to me is that I met my bride, and thank goodness for that. But it still didn't stop me from drinking. In fact, it got to the point, wine every night after work turned into those vodka and waters after work every day. And went on from there. Let's see. So that was just a really, really hard part of when you think back on it, how much wreckage you caused in your path. But to move on from that for a second, my brothers and I decided to buy my father out. And we're all alcoholics and we really didn't know it. And so we ran a business up there for many years. We bought the business in 1994. And at one point we had about 80 employees and a really strong business. But alcohol was always part of that story. No matter what we did, if we were trying to sell a project, we'd always be at the Petroleum Club or at the some bar somewhere, or having host a wine night. And you can always get people drunk enough so they could buy some crap from you, right? That's kind of the way it felt. And I got another story on that I didn't even think about until just now. But it pretty much, ran our lives. And even to the point where we would plan for our, we do strategic planning every year for our business. But we would go somewhere and chalk it up to a board meeting, but it always involved lots of alcohol and lots of really good wine. And the thing that I look back now, and I never really thought about it then, but looking back at it now, I go, we were in business for, almost 20 some years together, 25 years together. We had the same problems every single year. We'd go sit down and strategize about what we needed to do, and then we'd put a plan together, and then we'd go out and do it, but we never did it. And then the next year, we had the same plan. And so 20 years later, we never even fixed the problems we had 20 years ago. And it's just, if you're caught up in that, and you're caught up in the world of the alcohol, your brain is so clouded that you can't see through that to see what you really need to do. Even though you think you're doing the right thing and your business is progressing, sometimes now I even look back and say, what the hell could it have been like if we weren't drinking? We had offices in Anchorage, Fairbanks, Alaska, and Okinawa, Japan. But what could it have been like? I have no idea, because we never ever got there. And then it really hit me towards the end of my career with my partners. We are at the point in time I decided that I'd had enough. I needed to do more. My wife and I, she's the love of my life. Everything second. Anyways, I figured it's time. I need to quit this. I can't do this anymore. So I decided to go and check into a recovery center in Seattle. And just before I was getting ready to go, I ended up having kidney stones. And I was put in bed and I couldn't get up. So I had these meds and I couldn't drink. And so I kind of detoxed myself for a couple of weeks. And I thought, wow, I don't have to go to treatment. I'm going to do this on my own. So I went like that for about a year. And I'll finish that story, but I want to go back to what I was saying about another incident about business that really, at the end of our relationship, really kind of torqued me off. And that was that we had a client that was outfitting a new building, and the salesperson's strategy was to bring the committee in, 3 women, into our office on a Friday night, bring wine, and get them to make decisions on their building. And they probably spent 3 times as much as they should have spent on outfitting that building. Not to mention, it was an organization of men, and these 3 women bought pink chairs for the whole operation. I mean, hundreds of them. I mean, it was just wild to watch all this happen at the same time I was thinking about myself and recovery and trying to get out of this habit. So that kind of threw me off the deep end. But so I had spent about a year, a little over a year without drinking. And I tell you, I was pissed. Inside, I was pissed. I didn't want to do it, but I was really trying hard not to. And then one day, we were out doing something, and I remember my wife saying, "I don't want to see you drink." Ding! The light bulb went off. She doesn't want to see me drink. So that was kind of where it turned really bad. But so I'd not been drinking for a year, a little over a year, and so I put this elaborate plan together to go to Chicago and buy clothes. And there was no stores in Alaska to buy men's clothes, so I could go to Chicago and shop. But I had it all planned out. I had it shopping all day, had a nice manicure done, had a pedicure done, went over to the store, bought all the stuff I needed to buy, and then went out for a lobster dinner at the bar by myself. Had a glass of wine. That was good. Had a second glass of wine. And I thought that was about it. And I thought, hey, you can do this. And then I walked down the street to the hotel, and it was martini time. And that started the next roll downhill. And then back to business. I got it to a point. I was a slow learner, okay? I'm still a slow learner. But I decided that I really needed to get into recovery because I couldn't do it on my own. So I had signed up to come to a recovery place here in Prescott. And that's one of the reasons we're back here in Prescott, because it's such a great place to go through experiences of recovery. At least it was for me. Unfortunately, it didn't take the first time. Again, slow learner. But I remember being on the phone. We were talking business when I told my brothers I was going to go off to recovery. They were all for it at first, and they said, "How long are you going to be gone?" And I said, "Well, probably 45 days." And that is when the shit hit the fan. And it's like, "You're ruining our family. You're ruining this business," and on and on and on. I started to feel all this guilt, and so I just kind of lost it, and I came down here to recovery, and I went through the program. Some of you may have heard of it. It's Arrowhead. It's not here anymore. It was up on the hillside for men over 40 only, and it was a real nice place. We went to AA meetings, and I participated in the meetings. I thought it was pretty nice, but when I left, I didn't think I needed to go. So I went back to Anchorage, and probably within a few months, I was drinking again. And of course, it gets worse and worse as you go along, as some of you know. And what led me to drink again was I had a friend that went to recovery with me, and I had just talked to him like the day before, and I got a call saying that he'd overdosed in Flagstaff. And I was like, that just drove me crazy. And I just went out and drank again. I didn't have a sponsor, and I didn't go to meetings very much. So at that point, I still needed a lot of help and wasn't quite ready to give in or see the light. And I remember at Thanksgiving in 2000, I think that was 2018, it was like the worst time of my life. I was probably one of the lowest, second to the lowest part that I can remember. I'd gone to an AA meeting that morning, and I was having a really tough day, and I started drinking again, and that was Thanksgiving Day, and somehow during the day, I drank too much, and I bought a ticket to go to Hawaii. I don't know how I did that. And so I was going to it was in my back pocket just in case something happened, and I don't really know what triggered it. It was just something that happened that day, and I called an Uber, got my backpack, and went over to the airport, and went to check into the flight. And they took my ticket, and I had done it for the wrong day. And they wouldn't let me change it to get on the plane. So that was actually really good, but I was so mad. I found out later that my family had wondered what had happened to me because I just left. And they were out looking for me all over the place. Anyways, that was one of my lowest days. And right after that, we came down to a family get-together here, and I was in no shape to participate, so I stayed in our Airbnb and kind of recovered, and things happen for a reason, and without a higher power, I don't know how I would even be here today. Just really lucky, when we'd go driving, my brothers would say, "He's the best driver of the drunks, so he can drive all the time." Everywhere we went, I was the driver. I could have gotten a lot of trouble. But when we came here, I ended up going to a local church for a service. And I'll never really forget that day because I was sitting there having all these thoughts about what the hell are you going to do with your life? You've screwed this up. You've screwed that up. What are you going to do? How are you going to build for the future? And the pastor came up and he started talking about future. And he started talking about you have to make choices and move on with your future. And I was looking around the room and it was full and I went, oh shit, he's looking right at me. He had to be hearing what I was thinking. And so I thought about that for another couple of days, and I ended up going to an AA meeting here, another place here in town, not Safe Harbor, but another one. And I'm in there sitting down, and I look up, and there he is. He's coming to the meeting, and he's sitting right next to me. Now, if that's not your higher power telling you better get your shit together, I don't know what is, but it took more than that. And, I messed up again, and my wife decided to go back to Alaska. And that really tore me up and really didn't know what to do at that point, but I went back to Anchorage. Actually, before I went back to Anchorage, I decided to go to another meeting before I got on the plane. And I went to the senior center here off Bradshaw, I think is where it is. And I went to the meeting there, and the whole time I'm sitting there, messed up again. Here we go again. The merry-go-round is back in play. And I was thinking to myself, you're just too damn old to change. That's what I was thinking the whole time. So I go to this meeting, and the chip person gets up and says, anybody need a 30-day chip? And this 80-year-old lady stood up and got her chip. And I went, shit, if she can do it, I can surely do it. I'm only 63. No. Anyways, that kind of turned me around, really. And so I went back to Anchorage, and I was committed to getting a sponsor. And throughout the time in Anchorage, I met this. It was really kind of funny. You're going all the time. I kept going to meetings. They kept saying, come back, keep coming back. Even if you're drinking, keep coming back. So I went to this meeting a lot, same one. I met this crotchety old fart there. And I think he was 83 years old. We called him One-Leg Tony because he had somehow lost his leg, and he'd been sober for like 40 years. And he and I talked all the time, and we sat next to each other, and we kind of got to know each other a bit. And I always was impressed with him because he came up to Alaska for the summers, right? And he lived in this camper all by himself, 83 years old, one leg. He'd go to YMCA and swim for 2 hours a day. And he sold jerky on the side of the road. Everybody thought that was a crazy thing, but he told me that he put his 3 grandkids through college selling jerky on the side of the road. That's pretty good. Remind me of the My Pillow guy, But he used to ask me during the day, he'd say, Lowis, did you drink today? No. Did you drink yesterday? Well, yeah. Well, don't drink the rest of the day, damn it. Or other language. And that went on for quite a while, and he's a super nice guy and by himself, and so I decided one time to ask my wife if we could invite him over for dinner, and we did. Had a great time with him, and a couple days later, we had the same kind of meeting, same discussion. It was maybe a month later, he asked me the same question. Did you drink today? No. Did you drink yesterday? Well, maybe. He goes, don't drink today. And then he asked one of the other questions. He said, are you still married? Ooh, I had to think about that. And it hit me hard. I hadn't thought about that way before. And so I worked with him. We didn't kind of officially become sponsor and sponsee, but we started working some of the steps together. We knew he was leaving town for the winter. And he's such an old crotchety fart. He said, I got to take my camper down to Moose Pass and park it at my son's place for the winter, and I need a ride back. Can you come get me? So I said, sure. So I go down to pick him up, and he's got another guy with him, right? So we get in the car, and we're driving back, and that person that was there, Ben, became my sponsor. And I'm so glad he was, because he helped me through a lot of things. He said to me one day, when I was on the crossroads of coming back to Arizona by myself or spending Christmas with my family, I had heard it before, but he said it in a way that, one alcoholic to another is you need to have the courage to change. And I did. So it wasn't easy, and sobriety is not easy by any means. I think about it every day. And the recovery has been, I think, awesome. I'm still juggling things. I juggled for years and years and years, juggled family and booze, and I don't have to juggle the booze with it other than in my own colon. I can, because of AA and working through the steps and having the relationship with similar people out there, it gives you, or gave me, the opportunity to see life in a different way. I always wondered what I was going to be like when I wasn't drinking. I'm still an asshole, but that's okay. But I don't have to have that drink now. I mean, I still think about it all the time, but, meeting people like you all here, and one of the things we've done in some of our travels the last couple of years is try to hit an AA meeting along the way. And we've met some super incredible people all across the country. And everybody's got the same kind of stories. They're not the same, but they're similar, with the same common denominator. And I know that I wouldn't have been able to get this 2-year cycle through without having those opportunities to work with people like that. Just the awareness that I've gotten without having alcohol clouding your vision or my vision is, I just never thought about it before. Just an example is, I came down here on the airplane, Alaska Airlines, right? And normally you're on the plane and you don't really think about stuff like this. But the flight attendant came down the aisleway and asked people the row in front of me if they wanted any drinks. There were 6 people in that row, and she served 12 drinks. I never really thought about that, but having the clarity to be able to think things through without drinking, and having the steps every time be part of your life. So, you can make decisions, or before you make a decision, you can step back and you can think about it instead of just being unrational and moving towards a solution that you haven't even really thought through. But that whole thing about seeing all those people in the row drinking like that, I was like, God, that was me. 2? No, probably a whole lot more than 2. But just to be able to acknowledge that, and simple things for me, like watching the boob tube nowadays, and there's all these shows about alcoholics and alcoholism. Sometimes I wonder if that's a good thing to get the awareness out there, or if it's a bad thing and it's enabling people to think about it. But I like to think about it as it's just raising the awareness out there. We watched this show the other day. It's called Shameless. Has anybody seen it? And that guy, Frank Gallagher, holy crap. All the choices that guy makes and all the shit he goes through, that was me. And I didn't even know it. And the thing is, I thought I was fooling people, but I wasn't. I was only fooling myself. And Ben, my sponsor, really kind of helped me see through that. I remember the first time, right when we came back from that trip on the road, and Ben said, "Can I buy you coffee?" And I said, "Well, yeah, okay, fine." And so we went to a McDonald's and had coffee. And I hadn't been to a McDonald's and had coffee before, but we were there for 4 hours. And it was the first time, I think, that anybody ever really listened to me. He probably thought I was full of shit, but at least he listened. And, and all that stuff kind of lifted. And so eyes started to get open. A higher power had to direct that whole thing for me to even meet him. along the way, and to have one like Tony be kind of the instigator. It's fun talking to him on the phone now. I like to do that. But again, it's that awareness of the things. You probably read this book called The Four Agreements, right? A lot of you have. One thing that stood out to me in that book, and I'm not sure if it was in the Four Agreements or the supplement that came out after that, but it made me want to think about things kind of in my own words. And the awareness that you get when you have the clarity to think things all the way through is like, for example, see, let's say a window over there next to Will, right? And if you're standing on the right-hand side of that window and somebody else is standing on the left-hand side of that window, the person on the left can look out that window and see a deer, right? And the person on the right's going to look out the window at a different angle and see a dog. They're both right. But yet they'll argue amongst each other, especially in today's society with our cancel culture. And one opinion is the only opinion. When you have the clarity to think things through, at least you can think that there is another opinion and that it does count, and that maybe you were wrong. And drinking all the time and working through business and working through relations and community and so forth, you got to have. If you don't have that ability to look at somebody else's viewpoint, you're not going to get very far. I think there was one other story I was going to tell. Okay. So, I think it's ironic for me personally with Alcoholics Anonymous, in that several years ago, I was asked to be a speaker at another community service organization. And I traveled around the United States and other countries and gave motivational talks to these folks on the weekends. I remember my first time going, I was getting ready to go get my tuxedo on, and a guy says, "Well, what are you going to talk about?" And I said, "Well, I don't know, I've never done this before." And he goes, "Well, why don't you have a couple belts of whiskey and you won't have to worry about it?" And I did. For 2 years, I would pack my suitcase with 3 half pints of Crown Royal so that I could have it for the Friday and Saturday at these speaking engagements. That was crazy. And so then, when you decide you want to stop drinking, you come to AA, and it's all about talking and sharing, right? And so I had to have the booze to get up and BS, and now I don't have to have the booze, and I don't BS. It's pretty cool. It's just a whole different way of looking at things, and I'm super excited about it. And again, I wouldn't be able to be here if AA wasn't in my life. And I'll even go further and say that some of us are really in the need of being part of Al-Anon, because Al-Anon gives a different perspective on life too. And it's nice to have a partner that is working through those steps of the program as well. Yeah, I don't really have much more to say, but that is that's kind of my story. The biggest takeaway from this is, for me, is to work the steps, get a sponsor, continue to work the steps. I haven't got any sponsees yet. I'm still nervous about that, but I think that's coming down the road, and I'm excited to look at that avenue. I think that I'm probably done really early or something, but I am. That's all I got for right now, and I really appreciate you guys listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lewis. Let's give another big hand for our speaker.